The great hall of the Galactic Council was silent. Hundreds of alien eyes stared down at the single human who stood in chains. Cold light poured through crystal walls, showing his torn uniform and the blood on his knuckles. He did not bow. He did not plead. He only stared back at them. His name was Commander Reed, the first human officer ever allowed to serve among the Council fleets. And now he stood accused of breaking their sacred rule. The High Speaker's voice echoed through the chamber, slow and full of venom. You crossed into the forbidden zone of Cathar. You released the beacon. You brought chaos to our patrols. Every alien around him hissed, their scales glittering under the pale light. They called him reckless, dangerous, uncontrollable. To them, humans were a new and unpredictable species. To them, emotion was weakness and defiance was a crime. Reed lifted his head, his eyes sharp and calm. You call it forbidden, he said quietly. But you never said why. The chamber buzzed with anger. They did not answer, because the truth was simple. No one dared to speak of Cathar. It was a planet swallowed by storms, filled with living shadows and creatures older than light. No ship that entered ever returned. The Council used it as their silent punishment ground. The High Speaker raised a clawed hand. For your arrogance, human, you are sentenced to exile. The word rolled through the hall like thunder. You will be dropped upon Cathar, the world of beasts, no return, no rescue. Reed did not flinch. His chains rattled as the guards pulled him away. As he passed the alien crowds, he could hear them whisper. They think they are strong, one hissed. But the beasts will tear him apart before the first dawn. The shuttle that carried him to Cathar was small and old. No escort, no farewell. Only a mechanical voice reading his final rites. He sat in silence, staring at the stars through the cracked viewport. Each one a reminder of what humanity had endured. 1,000 wars, 1,000 near extinctions, and yet they always came back stronger. He smiled faintly. If this is death, he whispered, then I will make it remember me. As the ship descended, the view turned from starlight to fire. Storms of ash and lightning covered the planet below. Mountains moved like living things, and rivers of molten glass cut the land in half. The shuttle shook violently, alarms screaming. When it finally hit the surface, the impact threw him against the wall. The hatch burst open and the heat struck him like a hammer. He stepped out slowly, his boots sinking into black dust. The air burned his lungs, but he kept walking. In the distance, something roared, deep and ancient. The ground trembled. He looked around, scanning the horizon. There were bones, massive, curved, belonging to creatures bigger than ships. The sky flashed red, showing claw marks carved into stone cliffs. The wind carried a strange, low growl that seemed to come from everywhere. Reed tightened the straps of his ruined armor. He had no weapon except a survival knife and a flare pack. Still, he moved forward. Humans had always been explorers, always stubborn enough to step where others ran. Hours passed, though it felt like days. The light never truly changed on Cathar. It was always dim and furious. He found a cave carved into the base of a mountain and took shelter inside. The walls glowed faintly with some kind of organic moss. It was warm, almost breathing. As he rested, he heard distant thunder, not from the sky, but from the ground itself. The beasts were moving. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the strange heartbeat of the world. This place is alive, he murmured, and it hates everything that breathes. Suddenly, the cave shook, rocks fell, dust filled the air, and from the darkness behind him came a heavy breath. Reed froze, his hand moving to the knife at his side. Two eyes opened, massive, golden, unblinking. The creature filled the cave, its scales dark like smoke, its jaws lined with teeth the size of swords. It growled once, a sound that made the ground crack. Reed did not move. The beast's nose came close, sniffing, testing the strange scent of the human. Its breath was hot and metallic. Every instinct screamed at him to run. But he didn't. He stood still. Meeting its gaze, seconds felt like hours. The monster tilted its head, confused by his stillness. It roared again, louder, shaking the mountain. Reed took one slow step forward, holding the flare in front of him. The sudden burst of red light filled the cave. The creature recoiled, slamming its tail against the wall, but instead of fear, Reed saw something else in its eyes. Recognition. The light danced on his face, and for a moment, man and beast stood in the same fire. When the flare died, the cave was silent again. The creature turned and vanished into the dark, its heavy steps echoing deep into the mountain. Reed stood there, chest rising and falling. He could feel it watching him from somewhere unseen. He whispered under his breath, I'm still alive. Then he looked toward the storm outside and smiled. They sent me here to die, he said softly, but maybe they sent me home. He walked out into the burning wind. Lightning flashed over the horizon and the roar of the beast answered from afar. It was not a warning, it was a call. The morning on Cathar never came. The sky stayed the same shade of blood and smoke. Ash drifted down from the burning clouds. Commander Reed woke beside the dying fire he had built inside the cave. The air was heavy, full of distant growls and thunder. He looked at the black horizon and whispered, "Another day in hell." He checked his equipment, though there was little left to check. His ration pack was half melted. His knife chipped, his flare almost spent. Still, he moved forward, his boots sinking into ground that pulsed like it was alive. Every sound echoed like a whisper from something watching him. The beasts of Cathar were close, he could feel them before he saw them. He climbed over a ridge made of jagged bones. Below him stretched a valley of fire and mist. Shapes moved inside the smoke. Some walked on 4 legs, some on 6. Some crawled like shadows made of teeth. He crouched low, breath steady, heart pounding like war drums. No human had ever seen this place and lived to speak of it. He scanned the land with what remained of his visor lens. The readings were impossible. Energy signatures like living reactors. Cathar wasn't just a world of beasts. It was a living war machine, and he was standing in the middle of it. One wrong move and he would be erased like dust. A scream split the air, deep, ancient, full of rage. Reed turned and saw it. A titan of a creature rising from the valley floor. Its scales shone like molten armor, wings spreading wide enough to block the lightning. Its eyes locked onto him, the same eyes he had seen last night. Glowing gold in the dark, the beast had followed him. It moved faster than anything that size should. Each step shattered the rocks beneath its claws. The roar hit like a shockwave. Throwing him back against the ridge, he rolled, dirt in his mouth, pain in his ribs. The monster lunged, jaws snapping shut where he had stood seconds ago. Reed ran, sliding down the slope, every breath burning his chest. He reached the valley floor and stumbled behind a pillar of stone. The creature circled him, its tail whipping through the air like a blade. He knew he couldn't outrun it, he had to outthink it. He reached into his pack and pulled out the last flare. He waited until the monster's shadow fell over him. Then he struck it against the rock. The world exploded in red light. The creature reared back, roaring in pain and fury. Reed didn't waste the chance. He ran straight toward it. Not away, from his kind's oldest instinct, toward danger. He jumped onto its forearm as it slammed down. Climbing up the rough scales, the beast twisted and bellowed, trying to throw him off, but he held on. He drove his knife into the gap between its plates. The creature shrieked, not in pain, but in shock. No one had ever fought it like this. Reed shouted, "I am not your prey." The wind swallowed his voice, but the meaning was there. The creature's movement slowed, uncertain. It looked at him again, that strange human fire reflecting in its eyes. He pulled the knife free and dropped to the ground, breathing hard. They stared at each other, one made of flesh and defiance, the other of legend and flame. Slowly, the creature lowered its head. Its eyes never left his face. It let out a sound, not a roar, but a low rumble, almost like acknowledgement. Reed didn't move, didn't speak. Then, as if satisfied, the beast turned and walked away into the storm. Its footsteps shook the world. But Reed noticed something. The creature didn't vanish completely. It stayed within sight, circling him from afar, watching him, guarding him. Hours later, as he built another campfire, he saw its eyes again through the fog, 2 golden lights blinking slowly, patiently. He spoke softly into the darkness. "You could have killed me," he said. The wind answered with a low growl that almost sounded like laughter. Reed smiled faintly. "Guess we understand each other now." That night, he dreamed of Earth, of wild horses running across the old deserts, of men taming storms with nothing but grit and courage. When he woke, the world of Cathar felt a little less hostile. He stood up, stretched, and looked at the ridge. The golden eyes were gone, but massive claw tracks led deeper into the valley. He followed them without hesitation, because something inside him whispered that his exile was not punishment. It was destiny. As he walked, the mist parted, revealing more creatures watching him from the cliffs. Dozens of eyes glowed in the dark. They didn't attack, they didn't roar. They simply observed, like predators studying something they couldn't define. The human alone, walking through a world of nightmares with nothing but willpower, and somewhere above, hidden in the clouds, A satellite drone still transmitted his signal back to the council. The alien officers stared at the live feed in disbelief. "He's still alive," one whispered. The high speaker leaned forward, his voice cold. "Impossible," he hissed. "No one survives Cathar." But the image on the screen showed otherwise. A human silhouette walking beside the shadow of a beast. The impossible had already begun. The storms over Cathar never rested. Lightning crawled across the black sky like veins of living fire. Commander Reed walked through a canyon filled with steam and bone. Every few steps he could feel the world breathing beneath his feet. Cathar was alive, and it was watching him. He followed the massive claw tracks through the valley. They were fresh, pressed deep into the scorched ground. The creature he had faced, the one with the golden eyes, had left them. It hadn't killed him when it had the chance. And that meant something. Something rare, something powerful. Reed found a high ridge that overlooked the valley below. He could see movement in the fog. Giants stalking. Smaller beasts feeding. He watched them for hours, studying, learning their rhythm. They didn't fight for chaos, they fought for balance. The strong hunted, but they never wasted. The weak followed, but they were never abandoned. It was brutal, but it was honest. More honest than the council ever was. He built a small camp using debris from his crashed pod. Scraps of metal became tools. Shards of armor became traps. He hunted smaller creatures for food, but one night, he felt something shift in the dark, a presence. He looked up, and the beast was there again. Standing at the edge of the cliff, wings folded like mountains, eyes glowing gold, Reed slowly stood. He didn't raise his knife this time. He simply held out his hand, open and still. The creature tilted its head, curious, cautious. Its breath came out in deep waves, shaking dust from the ground. He could feel the heat of it, even from a distance. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, with a low rumble that sounded almost like thunder purring, the beast stepped closer. Its claws dug into the stone. Its tail curling like smoke, Reed stood his ground, heart racing. When the beast lowered its head, he reached forward. His hand brushed against a scale. It was warm, smooth, like metal alive. The creature didn't attack. It blinked once, slow and deliberate, and then it bowed its head lower. Reed smiled, whispering, "You're not just a monster, are you?" The beast exhaled, the sound deep and strange, almost like a word he couldn't understand. He laughed softly, the first laugh in weeks. The ground around them trembled as more shadows moved in the mist. Other creatures were watching, smaller but no less dangerous. When they saw the golden-eyed beast lower its head to the human, they backed away. Reed didn't realize it yet. But something ancient had shifted. The Alpha had accepted him from that day on. The golden beast followed him. It hunted near him, rested near him, protected his camp from other predators. When Reed walked, it walked beside him. He named it Ashen, after the color of its wings in the stormlight. Together they crossed rivers of molten stone and climbed cliffs that scraped the lightning. When he was too weak to climb, Ashen would crouch low and let him ride. It was strange at first. A creature of death carrying a man who was once its prey. But Cathar had its own rules, and both of them understood strength. Days turned into weeks. Reed learned the patterns of the beasts, how they communicated through roars, scent and vibration. He learned when to bow, when to fight, when to wait. They learned him too, his movements, his tone, his strange soft words. When he shouted a command, they listened. When he roared, they answered. He was no longer just surviving. He was leading one night as the storm raged above. Reed stood atop a rocky cliff. Dozens of golden eyes glowed in the dark below him. Beasts of every kind, scaled, winged, armored, had gathered in silence. He looked at them all and said, "You were feared, hunted?" "Caged," the thunder answered. "But no more," he said, his voice low and fierce. "Now we hunt together." The wind howled through the valley. Ashen roared, wings spreading wide like a living banner. The sound echoed across Cathar. The ground trembled as the beasts roared back. It wasn't chaos, it was a call to unity. For the first time in the planet's long, violent history, the beast had a leader that wasn't born of Cathar. They had a human, far above. The Council's observation drones still recorded everything. The alien generals watched in silence. "What is he doing?" One whispered. The high speaker's eyes widened. "He's not dying," he said softly. "He's taming them." Back on Cathar, Reed stood beside Ashen. His hand rested on the creature's neck. He looked toward the storm and smiled. "They wanted me gone," he whispered. Now I have something stronger than their fear. The lightning flared, and the beasts roared as one. Their voices rolled through the sky like war drums, and in that sound the galaxy's balance quietly began to shift. In the cold heart of the galactic citadel, the council gathered again. The same hall where they had sentenced the human now trembled with unease. A dozen holograms flickered over the round table, showing images from the edge of known space. Destroyed patrols, vanished fleets, broken satellites. Every report carried the same signal, a strange energy surge from Cathar. The world they had used as a death sentence was no longer quiet. The high speaker slammed his clawed hand on the table. "Explain this," he hissed. A nervous officer stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Our long-range probes captured. Movement, sir." "What kind of movement?" The speaker growled. The officer swallowed hard. "Organized movement." The chamber fell silent. He continued. "Thousands of large life forms, crossing the planet in formation, following heat trails, working together," one counselor scoffed. "Beasts do not march in formation." The officer looked pale. "These do." He pointed at the recording. On the projection, massive creatures moved through smoke. Not wandering, but marching, and at the front of the swarm, riding a creature of flame and ash, was a small figure. 2 legs, 1 heartbeat, 1 human, the hall filled with gasps. "That is impossible," someone whispered. "No human could survive that world," another said. Yet there he was, the same man they had cast away, Commander Reed, now leading the nightmares of Cathar like a general born from hell. Back on the planet, Reed sat high on Ashen's back. The wind howled through broken mountains. Lightning danced around them like banners of war. Below him, hundreds of beasts waited, silent, disciplined, ready. He had taught them signals, sounds, and unity. He had built an army from what the galaxy feared most, and tonight he would set them free. He pointed toward the sky. The beasts looked up, growling. Sensing what he felt in the clouds above, the Council's new surveillance drones circled like vultures. Reed smiled, a hard, tired smile. "Let them watch," he whispered. "Let them remember who they left here," Ashen roared, and the air itself shook. The drones burned out from the shockwave, their metal falling like rain. Far above the planet, a Council battleship floated in orbit, its scanners locked on Cathar's surface inside. The crew watched their screens flicker with static, then one by one the readings vanished. The captain frowned. "What's happening down there?" The navigator whispered, "Sir, the surface is moving." Before he could respond, the entire ship lurched. Something enormous struck from below, breaking through the atmosphere like a tidal wave of wings and fire. The beast roared, and the ship broke apart like glass. On the Council's homeworld, panic spread like wildfire. News networks played the footage of burning fleets. Citizens whispered about the cursed human, the ghost of Cathar. The beast rider, priests prayed, soldiers prepared, and leaders argued, but deep inside, everyone felt the same thing, fear not of the beasts, but of the man who commanded them. The high speaker called an emergency session. "This cannot be allowed to continue," he shouted. "He threatens the balance of the galaxy," an older counselor replied quietly. Perhaps the balance needed to be broken. The speaker glared at him. "He is one human." The elder's eyes glowed with something close to respect. "Yes," he said, "and that is exactly why we should be afraid." Meanwhile, on Cathar, Reed stood beneath the storm. The beasts rested around him like living mountains. He looked at the dark horizon and whispered, "They sent me to die." He placed his hand on Ashen's neck, but death never wanted me. The creature's golden eyes burned brighter. Reed raised a signal torch into the wind. Its red flame cut through the smoke like a blade. The beasts stirred, wings spreading, claws scraping the stone. The time for hiding was over. That night the first exodus began. The beasts of Cathar took flight, breaking through the clouds. Their roars echoed across systems. Planets near the rim saw them in the skies, shapes too massive to comprehend. The old myths returned, children cried, soldiers froze, and the galaxy remembered its oldest fear. In the Citadel, an aide ran into the speaker's chamber, breathless. "They've left the planet." He shouted, "What do you mean?" The speaker demanded. "They are flying through the void, heading toward us." The speaker's throat went dry. He turned slowly toward the window. In the endless dark of space, something glowed. A storm made of wings, lightning, and one human riding at its heart. The speaker whispered, "What have we done?" And for the first time in centuries, the rulers of the galaxy felt what humanity had felt for ages. Helplessness, fear and awe. The human they had thrown away had returned, and he was not coming back alone. The skies above the galactic citadel turned dark without warning. The stars disappeared one by one, swallowed by a growing shadow. People looked up from the crystal streets, pointing, gasping. The light dimmed until the towers of gold turned to silhouettes. Then the sound came. Low, distant like thunder traveling through bone. In the council chamber, alarm screamed. Every monitor flickered red, and officers shouted. "Something is entering orbit," the high speaker snapped. "Identify it." The officer stared at the readings, his scales trembling. "It's alive," he whispered. "What do you mean alive?" The speaker roared. The officer's voice cracked. "Sir, the sky is full of them." Through the great windows of the citadel, the council saw the impossible. Massive shapes moved across the clouds. Wings like continents, eyes glowing brighter than stars. Beasts of Cathar, hundreds of them. Covering the heavens, they blotted out the light, turning day into eternal dusk and leading them. Riding at the center of the storm was the human. Commander Reed stood atop Ashen, his armor fused from the hide of slain titans. Lightning coiled around his body, reflecting in his cold human eyes. Beneath him the beasts flew in formation. Silent and disciplined, each wing beat shook the atmosphere. Each roar echoed across worlds. He had returned from the dead, and he had brought Cathar with him. The alien defenses activated. Thousands of anti-orbital cannons rose from the citadel walls. Energy shields shimmered like blue glass. The speaker shouted, "Fire!" But before the order could echo, something else happened. The beasts roared in unison. The sound shattered glass, silenced weapons, and cracked mountains. Every ship in orbit lost control, their systems fried by the sonic shockwave. In seconds, the mighty defense grid went dark. Reed descended through the clouds. Flames licked across Ashen's wings as they approached the city. Smaller beasts followed like living lightning. He looked down at the shining towers, the same towers that had once condemned him. He could almost see the hall where they had called him weak, where they had laughed at humanity. Now those halls were trembling under his shadow. The beasts landed one by one, crushing streets beneath their weight. Citizens ran in every direction. Soldiers froze at their posts. Reed dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the marble with a soft final sound. The air around him burned, but he walked calmly toward the council hall. Behind him, Ashen lowered its massive head. The creature's golden eyes fixed on the citadel gates like a silent guardian. Inside the hall, the council stood waiting. Their voices were gone, replaced by fear. The high speaker took one step forward, forcing his tone to stay calm. "You are a traitor," he said. "You have broken the laws of the galaxy." Reed stopped at the base of the stairs. He looked up at them, eyes cold, steady, human. "The galaxy," he said softly, "broke its own laws long before I did," the speaker hissed. "You dare threaten the council?" Reed's lip curled into a faint smile. "You sent me to die," he said, "but I didn't die. I learned." He took another step forward. "I learned how to survive, how to lead, how to make the monsters listen." He pointed at the sky where Ashen roared above the city. "And now the monsters are here to listen to me." The guards raised their weapons. Reed didn't even flinch. He raised his hand, and the ground outside the hall shook violently. The beasts answered his signal instantly. With one thunderous roar, they surrounded the citadel. The walls cracked, windows shattered, and the guards fell to their knees. The council froze, realizing they were powerless, one human, commanding an entire world of nightmares. Reed walked closer to the speaker. "You feared humanity," he said quietly, "because you knew we would never kneel." The speaker's voice shook. "What do you want?" Reed looked around the grand hall that once judged him. He said, "Not revenge." He reached up and touched the emblem on his broken armor. "I want you to remember. Remember what you called weak. Remember what you cast away. Remember what humans become when you try to kill them." Thunder roared above as Ashen opened its wings. Lightning poured through the clouds like rivers of light. The citadel shook, towers bending under the pressure of the storm. The speaker fell to his knees, covering his head. Reed turned toward the open doorway, his shadow stretching across the floor. "You wanted a monster," he said, his voice low. He glanced back over his shoulder, eyes glowing in the lightning. "You made one." The hall exploded with wind as he stepped outside. Ashen knelt, waiting for him. Reed climbed onto its back and looked down at the shattered city. The beasts raised their heads. Waiting for his command, he lifted his hand slowly, and the storm went silent. Then, in a voice that echoed through the stars, he said one word, "Go!" The beasts roared as one, wings spread, flames rising, and together they soared into the clouds, leaving the broken citadel behind. The world that had banished him now knelt in fear, and the legend of the human rider of Cathar was born. The citadel still burned behind him. Its towers of gold had melted into rivers of light. The sky above the capital world was filled with smoke and wings. Reed sat atop Ashen silent, watching the flames consume the arrogance of empires. He did not smile, he did not celebrate, he only whispered. They wanted balance. The beasts of Cathar waited around him like statues of living fire. They did not destroy the fleeing ships. They simply watched, silent, waiting for their leader's breath. Reed closed his eyes. In his mind he heard every scream, every order, every insult the council had thrown at humanity. He remembered their words. Humans are reckless, humans are violent, humans are doomed. Now the galaxy trembled under that same recklessness, that same fire they had mocked. Far across the stars, fleets began to surrender. World after world transmitted the same desperate message. We yield. We seek peace. Call off the beasts. Reed listened through the broken comms. Their voices cracked with fear and regret. He spoke softly. Peace comes after memory. He ordered Ashen to turn toward the next world. The massive creature roared and the sky split open. Behind them followed the storm, a living armada of claws and lightning. When they entered each system, defenses powered down before they even fired. The people had seen the images. The legend had already spread. The human rider, the tamer of Cathar, the one who brought judgment from the abyss on one world. An alien general stood before his fortress gates. Trembling, he shouted through the storm, Why? What do you want from us? Reed landed in front of him, dust swirling like ghosts. He said, I want you to remember that fear is not ownership. He dismounted, walking past the general without striking. Behind him, the beasts stayed still, waiting for his signal. He whispered to the wind, No more chains, no more gods. Days turned into weeks. The beast became legend, the human became myth. Some worlds began to rebuild under his watch. Others sent envoys begging for protection instead of surrender. Reed accepted none of their thrones, he refused their crowns, he simply said, We are not your rulers, we are your warning, from orbit. The view of Cathar itself changed. The storms had calmed. Forests of crimson metal began to grow again across its surface. The world was healing under his command. The beasts hunted, but they no longer destroyed. The chaos that had ruled for centuries now moved in order. Cathar had a heart again, and its pulse beat with human rhythm. Meanwhile, the surviving council members met in secret. They whispered of assassins, of fleets, of desperate plans. One of them finally said, We could ask Earth to recall him. Another hissed, Earth? You think humans control that creature anymore? Their silence was the answer, because deep down they all knew. The galaxy had changed its center of power, and it now revolved around the one being they had cast away. Reed sat alone on a cliff that overlooked Cathar's glowing plains. He removed his helmet and let the alien wind touch his face. He whispered, They called me monster. Ashen lowered its head beside him, its massive eye reflecting the stars. He touched its scale gently, but maybe monsters are just those who refuse to break. That night, he dreamed of Earth, of blue oceans, green forests, and the voices of his people. He remembered laughter, music, light, the things that made humanity human. When he woke, the storm was quiet. He looked at the horizon and saw the first sunrise Cathar had seen in centuries. Soft light breaking through crimson clouds. For the first time, the world looked alive again. Then from orbit came a transmission. The symbol of Earth Command glowed on his wrist link. A human voice, calm and strong, filled the air. Commander Reed, it said. The Council seeks peace under your terms. Reed looked at Ashen and smiled faintly. Peace, he whispered, after all this time. He pressed the comm switch. Tell them peace is possible, he said. But it begins when they stop calling us animals. The message spread across every channel. It echoed through the colonies, through the fleets, through the stars themselves, and on worlds that had once spat on humanity's name. Children now pointed to the sky and whispered. The human rider brought the dawn. Reed stood, his silhouette glowing against the rising sun. He raised his hand to the storm that had once sought to kill him. Now it obeyed, he whispered. This is not revenge, Yarn, this is balance. The beasts roared softly, a sound not of anger but of respect. And for the first time in galactic memory, silence followed. The kind of silence that comes when the universe finally understands that humanity was never the weakest. They were simply waiting to be unleashed. Centuries passed, worlds were rebuilt, skies cleared, and new cities rose from the ashes of the old empires. The beasts of Cathar became guardians of the wild worlds. They no longer hunted for hunger. They protected the balance the human had taught them. And though the storm still rolled across that crimson sky, they were calmer now, as if the planet itself finally breathed in peace. Children on distant colonies grew up hearing his name, not as a curse but as a promise. They called him the Rider of Cathar, the Storm-bearer, the one who tamed the dark. His face was carved into temples and etched on starship hulls. Every species told the story differently. Some said he was a god of fire. Some said he was a ghost riding the wind. But all agreed on one thing. He had been human. Elders told their children how the council had once ruled through fear, and how a single man turned that fear into light. They spoke of the day he returned riding a monster larger than mountains, of how he refused every throne, every empire, of how he left behind only one message. Strength is not control, it is understanding. On Cathar, the beasts still gathered once every cycle under the twin moons. They circled an ancient monument built of stone and flame. At its center stood his armor, fused forever into the rock. Lightning touched it each night, yet it never broke. Some said the human spirit still walked there, that the wind carried his voice across the deserts, whispering to the newborn creatures, protect, never dominate, far away. The descendants of the council finally came to Earth. They walked among humans with lowered heads. They offered peace treaties, technology, and apologies written in the stars. But the humans only smiled. They had already forgiven them. Because the human who had changed the galaxy had taught them that revenge dies. But memory lasts in the halls of the new Galactic Union. A statue stood taller than all others. Not a king, not a conqueror. A man with one hand resting on a beast's neck, the other pointing toward the horizon. At his feet were words carved in every known language. They sent him to die. He taught them to live. Stories spread faster than light. Miners in asteroid belts sang songs about him. Pilots swore by his name before jumping into hyperspace. And when storms gathered on any world, people would look up and say, he rides again. For sometimes lightning still came from the direction of Cathar, and a shadow shaped like wings crossed the moon. No one knew if it was real. But hope never needs proof. One evening, on a small colony at the edge of the galaxy, a child asked her grandfather, was he truly real? The old man smiled, eyes shining with the reflection of 1,000 stars. Real enough to change everything, he said. Real enough that the galaxy learned to listen when humans speak. She whispered, will he ever come back? The old man looked at the horizon, where the storm clouds glowed red and gold. When we forget who we are, he said softly, he will return. Some say that on nights when the universe goes quiet, a single roar echoes through the void, not of anger but of warning, and every captain, every soldier, every ruler feels it in their bones. The reminder that somewhere beyond the reach of law or God, a human still rides the storm on Cathar. Dawn came again. Soft light brushed the mountains. The armor on the cliff shimmered for a heartbeat. A shadow moved across the sun, vast wings spreading wide. And though no one saw his face, the voice that followed was clear. I was never your monster, it said. I was your mirror. The winds rose. The sand danced and the world smiled because legends never die. They simply become the breath of the stars. And wherever courage is born, wherever injustice rises, the universe will always remember the human who rode the beasts of Cathar, the exile who became their king, the man who turned fear into faith, the name spoken with awe across every world. Commander Reed, the human rider of Cathar.